1, 2, testing. Perfect. Okay, then we are on. What is it? Good morning and welcome to the last day, the last session of the Sámi EU week. My name is Kristina Hatta. I work in the Sámi Council as head of the cultural unit, and I have the pleasure to guide you through this day about the potential in Sámi culture. And with this being said, I would like to welcome our co-host, Malin Björk, member of the European Parliament. I let you introduce yourself and welcome the group.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having approached me and my colleagues to co-host and to be part of the Summer Week. For us, it's a very big thing, not only because it's rare for us to organize bigger meetings after COVID, but it's very exceptional, I think, that you take this space, this political and cultural and space that the European institutions represent, and that you give to all of Europe and show what Sámi and Sápmi and Sámi culture and politics is about. So it is really an honor for us to be able to co-host this with my fellow member of parliament colleagues. And this topic that we will speak about today, because you've had very interesting topics about climate justice yesterday, but the potential of Sámi culture, I think it's a topic that is of course of relevance for Sámi people, to Sápmi, but also to the rest of us if we want to understand our past and move to the future. Europe is made of minority languages, cultures, peoples, and not always does these, or even rarely, maybe correspond to the borders of these nation states that are the main organization that we have in Europe. So I think what you bring is also a kind of perspective that is useful and valuable for the rest of us in order to how we're going to shape Europe and cultural politics as well. Because Sápmi exists over 4 different nation states, and we have this situation in other parts of Europe as well, and I think this can be an inspiration for many. I just want to say that when I worked on a report, I think this week is also, and this panel is important because of visibility, of course. I don't know the kind of conversations you've had during evenings and breaks, etc., with people. But I was a report on a file on gender-based violence here in the European Parliament, and when I wanted to insert a paragraph about different forms of gender-based violence and focus on indigenous peoples, some of my fellow colleagues looked at me. What indigenous peoples in Europe? They thought about South America, North America. I said, in Sweden, Norway, Finland, we of course have Sámi peoples, and they said, and this was last year, 2021. So can you imagine how important this presence is? And so, so in the end, we have to do our job. We have to put, the realities of Sámi communities into different texts at European level, because it also creates visibility. So that's just a promise from my side and from our side that we will also bring this work forward in our everyday work in other files that we work on. And the importance of culture, of course, you have chosen to organize a panel on this because you see the full importance of that. It can also be very clearly understood when we look at history. And when my country, I'm from Sweden, wanted to persecute the Sámi population, the control over land and resources was, of course, one very big thing. And you probably spoke about that yesterday in the panel on climate justice. But the other part was, of course, to control and to control language and culture and education. And I think at least an eye-opener for many members of the European Parliament was when the Sámi Blood, Sameblod, the film, won the Lux Prize. So that was I think an important step for us that wanted to see that film as the winner in the annual film prize competition that we have in the European Parliament. Some maybe opened their eyes about the history of the persecution of Sámi culture. So I think taking back the power over the politics that shapes Sámi culture is a very important project that we could share together. And I think to say also that Sámi cultural heritage is also Swedish heritage, it's also Norwegian heritage, it's Finnish heritage, Russian heritage, and of course we learn about ourselves if we learn about Sámi culture. I think we need more Sámi cultural expressions of all kinds, not only for, and I think it's important, not only for tradition and preservation, but present and future. So I think the focus today is also and very much about understanding our future and to give visibility to the future. And for that, and since I'm in politics, of course, I think there needs to be some support coming forward. I think the first is, of course, acknowledgement of the importance of Sámi language and culture for all of us in the Nordic countries, but also, of course, in the European Union. So political support must be stepped up. Financial support must be stepped up, and it's good that you all work with our Nordic governments, but it's very good if the EU could also step up. What I read is peanuts what the Sámi communities receive from the EU. So I just say that here. Maybe you can put pressure on the financiers. It's very small projects. And I think institutionally also, there are several Sámi institutions. I learned just more about the Sámi Language Center. These kind of institutions are extremely important, I think, to be instruments and vehicles of promoting and also making it more sustainable as structures to work for promotion and development of Sámi cultures. So I think to think about what kind of institutional support and structures are needed for Sámi cultures is something that I will listen to and take with me. And anyway, I look forward to listen to you and to take with me in the work we do here what comes out of this panel. So thank you very much for taking this political space and giving strong messages to us as European parliamentarians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Malin, for that welcome and for those inspiring words. I'm happy to hear that that you warmly welcome us in that way. And I also think that it's going to be an interesting day. I think we're going to hear a lot of good interventions. And I think that we'll just start off, since we used so much time on discothequing here in the beginning. As I said earlier, my name is Christina. You can never say one's name many times, huh? But I work in the Sámi Council in the cultural unit. My background is from the art and cultural field, and where I have been working as a project manager and potato since my teenager days and my whole adult life. And then in 2017, I was so lucky to be able to work in the Sámi Council, which I feel is a really great working place for me to be able to work for the Sámi community as a whole and for the Sámi art and culture field as a whole, not only on one side of the border, but for the field in general. That feels really home for me, and yeah, I'm really happy to have that privilege. I have been asked to start off this session sharing some takeaways from a recently published report about the situation for the Sámi art and cultural field and how to strengthen the self-determination for the Sámi cultural field. This report is a result of a work of a think tank that we established during the pandemics, and we gave out this report in March. Leia here is one of the members from the think tank. Piritta Näkkelejärvi, who we heard yesterday, was also one of the members, and other artists, cultural institutions, festivals from all over Sápmi took part in this work. And their mandate was to describe the current situation for the Sámi field, but also to form new thoughts for a sustainable Sámi art field for the coming 10 years. I will try in a short 10 minutes to wrap up 20 pages of report. Let me also just add that there is a huge knowledge gap in the Sámi art and culture world. So for us to be able to produce this report and all written descriptions are of huge value for us, and hopefully also for policymakers as you, as our goal with this report has been that it should serve as a guide for the future development of Sámi cultural policy, both in Sápmi, but also in this room and space. Internationally, there is a huge and growing interest for Sámi art and culture. Sámi contemporary art, film, design, literature, music, all experience a large and growing demand from the international market. We will hopefully hear more about this later today, I think, both from Leia Simma from the Challegoate, a support organization for Sámi literature, but also from Gun-Britt Retter, today representing the International Sámi Film Institute as a board member. However, with all this great demand and also with the cross-border market possibilities that Sámi artists have, there are still very much unused potential to grab. So the think tank has tried to answer what hinders the huge development that could be there for Sámi art and culture, and how to unleash the potential. What is sustainable development in a Sámi context, and what about the artistic freedom in Sápmi? So before I give you some of the conclusions in the report, I would like to start off the same way as the report do, sharing three premises to be able to understand the Sámi art and cultural field. Because the think tank experiences that they are not understood, that the Sámi field is not understood, and that it exists an expectation that the Sámi field is in the same situation the same position as a national field. It is kind of the same field. And the think tank want to highlight that from the Sámi point of view, this is not the situation. And thus we see a need to explain what is so special about the Sámi art and culture world. In the same way as the Sámi people are their own nation who live, work and travel across the borders in Sápmi and consider themselves as one people, Sámi culture workers and artists also naturally work across these national borders, considering themselves as one common field. This can be seen, for example, in the programming of Sámi festivals, theater performances, band constellations, art projects, literature releases, and other Sámi art and culture productions. In the Sámi art and culture world, the national borders don't exist. At the Sámi festival also, you will meet audience from all over Sápmi. So the first premises to understand the Sámi art and culture world is that the Sámi art and creative field is to be considered as one common field across 4 national borders. The Sámi way of life, work and creative practices have always been connected. Even though you might not know it, there's a lot of culture workers also sitting in this room, being politicians, but also tuojars, Sámi handicrafters, joikers, Sámi joikers, Sámi vocal traditions, etc. Precisely because the creative practice are so intertwined with our way of life. Historically, we have not had word for art and artists. The word taita, art, and taitar have in modern times been translated into Sámi and are used today when referring to art and artists. Nevertheless, the practice in Sápmi has not changed. Everything should still be understood and viewed in a holistic way. Artists are not only artists in Sápmi. So that is the premises number 2, that the Sámi way of life, work and creative practices have always been connected and must be seen and understood holistically. The same is with the word tradition that we heard from Malin recently and also yesterday. In the Sámi culture, tradition is something that moves and changes with times and generation. So it not only belongs in the museum, but also a part as a living and thriving culture. And our traditional practices change over time, which I think is really beautiful. So the think tank concludes that definitions and words are important and that it's important for the Sámi self-determination of Sámi art and culture that the field itself are giving the opportunity to define relevancy, quality, and definitions of words. This brings me to the last premises, that Sámi art and creative practices are often sustainable in nature because they are holistic, and we often work based on principles of passing the cultural heritage and the land to future generations. So supporting Sámi cultural industries, art and creative actors are also in fact an investment in sustainability. Now that you might understand the Sámi art and culture field a bit more, I will give you some of the main conclusions of the report. it's a really interesting report that I hope that you will have the time to look at. So, as I said today, there is a huge global interest for Sami art and culture, but the field today is not able to meet the large demand in a way that benefits the Sami community and the Sami cultural actors. And there is a need for a strengthened infrastructure and Sami-run financing schemes. The think tank also experiences that the artistic freedom and self-determination in cultural Sápmi is in a very weak position today. The art is and will remain free. Is a fundamental principle in the Nordic and European countries, and based on these principles, all instruments and policies are built. This is done, among others, by facilitating self-determination in the field, participation in the policy creation, peer reviews, and not least by the principle of arm's length distance between policy and cultural fundings. But national cultural policy today is adapted mostly within and for the respective national fields, and without little regard to culture, to the Sami cultural world's needs and premises. We have very little self-determination, and political discussions are made without our participation or consent. At the same time, the think tank also experiences that there is an expectation that the different schemes and support systems are meant to also meet and stimulate the Sami field. So, as I said, there is a huge knowledge gap in regards to what the Sami art and culture world needs and what their premises are. We also experience that it's huge differences in the working conditions and opportunities for the cultural Sápmi depending on which side of the border you are born in. National states also often just recognize the Sami market within their national borders, and there is therefore a perception that the Sami market is too narrow. But in fact, the Sami market, seen from a Sami perspective, is quite huge. But the market development of Sami creative industries faces major challenges related to border barriers and great differences in cultural policy. And the think tank believes that there is therefore a fundamental need to recognize and stimulate the cross-border practice in the Sami art and cultural industry. Abuse or use without consent and appropriation of Tochi, our handicraft, Sami stories, yoik, and other Sami cultural property is also still a major and growing challenge throughout Sápmi. There exists an attitude that the Sami culture is free for everyone to draw artistic inspiration from, which has resulted in that it isn't the Sami population and the Sami cultural industries who today make the most money of commercialization of the Sami culture. It's people from outside the Sami community. So the think tank also wants policymakers to prioritize protection of Sami culture property. These were some of the main points from the report, and there are also many other interesting aspects of it. Also on the Swedish side of Sápmi, a cultural network consisting of Challegate and other cultural institutions have also recently published a report. Viermyö K is the name of the network, and that is also a very interesting report, concluding much of the same, that we need to stimulate the transnational Sami culture field. So with these words, I think that is what I had of time today, and hopefully this could give a good introduction for the day. Kiitos. And I think we'll then just continue with the rise of Sami literature, which is a really great story from Sápmi, a true story that Lea Simma from Challegate, an organization that supports Sami literature, will bring to us today. So take it away, Lea.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you. And thank you for letting us participate in the Jordapesi Culture Sápmi think tank. Okay, so I'm working at Challegate, the Literary Center, and we're based in Jokkmokk. But before I start to talk about our work, I want to give you a brief overview of the literary history of Sápmi. And since we are here in the EU, I will tell a short story about how Sami literature came to influence the whole Western world. And it starts 1673. There was a book published called Laponia by Sheffers. And in that book, there was two yoik poems, love poems, that took Europe by storm. It was Järmaula, Olav Sirma, a young Sami priest student who had written those down, and he wrote them in Kemisami, a language that is now extinct, with the Latin translation. And people all over Europe were taken by the passion, burning passion that these poems displayed, and were like amazed that Arctic people could write such beautiful poetry with amazing landscape descriptions. And so they were translated many, many times into French, Dutch, German, English, all kinds of languages, and were republished, the whole book as well as the poems by their own, and they were alluded to and cited, and even the German, one of the most prominent German authors, Goethe, was inspired by the poems to write one of his works. Then we can quickly jump back to the start of the 20th century, where the nation-states' colonization of the Sami lands were intensified, and so were the assimilation processes. Sami people started to organize. In that time, there were the first Sami novels were written, poems. There were pamphlets, political pamphlets, and magazines were started. So the Sami people have been banging the drums and advocated for their rights and told their story and tried to raise awareness about our issues and our people for over 100 years. Then came a dark time in Sami literature. Between 1920 and roughly 1970, during that half a decade, there were only 3 books published, Sami books. And that reflects the time in Sápmi. That how effective nation-states' policies were to silence and silence Sápmi. With the school history, forced relocation, banning of yoik, and so on, and colonization as well, exploitation. But But as in the rest of the world during the 50s and 60s, the civil rights movements rose. Minorities and indigenous peoples demanded their rights. And that spread to Sápmi as well. So during the 70s, we see a revival in the politics, in culture. The first Sami publishing houses were established back then, and people just started to write in Sami, even though they haven't been taught to write in Sami languages. And that's when the Sami languages were standardized, the biggest Sami languages. So since then, Sami people have been writing all sorts of literature. We have every kinds of themes written, all and really broad range of literature. We have fantasy, we have chick lits, we have all kinds of literature. But even though there weren't that much written literature, that doesn't mean that we didn't have any literature at all, because we in Jallegote, we count our rich storytelling tradition into that, and also yoic poetry. So that was very much alive during those dark times as well, and a part of our history and our literary heritage. And as indigenous peoples, our knowledge hasn't been stored in libraries. It has been stored in our bodies as embodied libraries that we have has passed on. The knowledge has been passed on through generations. So the Sami literature has influenced and been influenced by the world during history, and it's not an obscure language up north that only writes things that concerns to them and isn't relevant to other cultures or the rest of the world. So now we can go to our history. It started 6 years ago. There were 8 students that had attended a course in Sami fiction writing in Jokkmokk, the Sami Education Center. And as aspiring authors, they were quickly faced that the literary field in Sweden, on the Swedish side of the border, wasn't that great. There weren't any, apart from this course, there weren't any education for authors. There were few publishing houses, no funding for Sami literature. There were really, the whole Sami literary infrastructure was pretty much dead on the Swedish side. If you went to the library, you could find bookshelves after bookshelves in the Sami sections of books that were about Sami people, but not written by Sami. And if you find some fictional book, it would probably be in the wrong language, not in your own language, because the knowledge about Sami literature was so low. So those students started a writers' association called BAGO, to try to fix this situation. So they quite quickly found a strong ally in the Swedish Writers' Union, Författarförbundet, to try to get their help to change things. At that time, there had been a report on the status of the languages, Sami languages in Sweden, and they had counted that a book written originally in Sami was released on the Swedish side every 50 years, so 0.2 books every year. So you had to read that book many times over and over before you could get your hands on a new book in the Sami language that was originally written in Sami. So the Författarförbundet says, and BAGO said that Sami literature is a part of Sweden's literature. Swedish literature is not complete without Sami literature. So it's not that it's a part of the nation-state's heritage as well. And it would be a mutual benefit for both to strengthen the Sami literature. So they released a 10-point program in 2016, which one of them was to establish a writer center. And so they did. during the first Bago and Books Festival, a Sami literary festival that Bago arranged 2017, they also could announce that they had got funding for establishing a project to establish a literature center. So we started up in 2018 with the two people working there. It was me and Lars-Anders Bär first months. Then Elin and Alaba came on board a few months later. So the name Jallegård is both a noun and a verb. It means a writer's house or writer's home, and to start writing. So that sums up pretty much of what we do. We try to gather all the authors and try to give their advice and support them in any way we can, and also encourage people to write. So our work aims to get more writers, more books, more readers, and try to promote Sami literature in any way and knowledge about it. So basically we just get the manuscripts from people's desk and try to get that published in a book form, and then we take the book and try to promote and bring it to the reader. So that's how we have been working. But how do you build up something that's been like so neglected for a long time? So the first thing we did was to ask the Bago members, what do you need from us? And they said creative writing. So we just started arranging courses. But being Sápmi such a broad field, so we started to seek out all kinds of collaborations. The easiest was the neighboring fields like theater and film. So we arranged courses with the EU-Sámi theater, and we also had works with Filma Pargisjärvi. So we give names to people. Here are writers. Here you can find books. This is how you buy things from Norway, because the border is a big hindrance for the flow of Sami literature, because most is published in Norway because there's a support system for Sami literature. So in these years we have now they're released 1.6 books every year with Sami original manuscripts, so a raise by 700%. It's quite good. Few years there have been Sami authors winning the Swedish biggest literary prize, Augustpriset. Göteborgs universitet, HDK Valand, has established a Sami translator master program in literary translations. Last year, 2 years ago, the book fair in Gothenburg had no Sami authors in their program. Now, in their program this year, they have like in every other page there's a Sami name. So now the Swedish people have also realized that Sami literature is relevant for us too, and the interest is really good. And institutions are now writing to us saying, "Hey, we want to work with you. We have these resources. How can we work together? What do you need?" So Litteraturbanken that takes care of the cultural heritage, literary heritage, is going to gather and make available Sami texts in their literature archive. But the one thing that's been most rewarding to me was this year we went to one of the Swedish biggest literary festival, Litfest, who we have close collaborations with. And there was a new debutante, Ella Marianotti, a Sami writer, who sat on stage and talked about her book. And she was asked that, why don't you elaborate more on the Sami elements in your writing? Because she has Sami elements, but she doesn't, they are like uncommented in her text. They just sort of pass by, and she was like, I don't need to. There have been so many people before me educating about Sami people, elaborating on Sami issues, so I can just be free in my own writing and don't have to explain anymore. So she thanked all the writers before her. So yeah, I would like to end with that. So, but one of our biggest challenges ahead is to find a stable, permanent funding for our center, because it's not easy to build new institutions in Sápmi because we don't have those big cultural budgets. There's no room to promote or develop new institutions in Sápmi, and those institutions that are heavily underfinanced. It's easy to get project money, but not long-lasting funding. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. And yeah, I was also moved by that we have reached that far. It's also a good feeling. And some that also have reached far is Sámi Film. And I'm happy to introduce my colleague in the Sámi Council, Gundrit Retter, usually head of the Arctic and Environmental Unit, but today also board member of the International Sámi Film Institute. And she will be telling about the Sámi storytelling in a new shape.
Yes, thank you for that introduction, and might be confusing for many to see me in an unusual role, but it's a great pleasure to replace the director of the International Sámi Film Institute, who unfortunately wasn't able to be here of a reason that Sámi film is growing and expanding the opportunities, so she was hindered from coming here. So I was here, and I'm happy to take on that role. I'm a board member of the International Sámi Film Institute, an institute that has fought for Sámi film and storytelling, and through funding and competence building has empowered a whole generation of Sámi filmmakers and brought Sámi film to great international achievements. And it's in a way, like Leah also said, that we are now reaching out with our stories, also through film, and I was happy to hear the developments in the Sámi literature as well. What I'm going to focus here today is not that one. Wasn't that another slide coming before? Anyway, Arran is the most prestigious project the Sámi Film Institute has ever carried out, aiming to put Sámi storytelling and creative will at the forefront with the use of extended reality XR technologies. And this is really something I'm very much into. The Arran project is taking place, or this event is taking place on the Venetian island on San Servolo, just outside Giardini, and in the middle between Giardini and Lido, where the Venice Film Festival takes place. In between the buildings that used to be an asylum and house the outcasts, the Arran Lavvu will raise. So Arran 360 will feature 6 original 360-degree screen-based works created by 6 leading indigenous Sámi filmmakers from across Sápmi, the Sámi homeland. And these circular works will be presented in a custom-made ginormous lavvu, a traditional Sámi tent and mobile dwelling, equipped with a 360-degree screen and a state-of-the-art immersive sound system that will create a holistic experience and embrace the audience with Sámi soulscapes and creative power. Arran 360 is part of the extended program for the historic transformation of the Nordic Pavilion by the Sámi Pavilion project at the Venice Biennale in this year. Arran 360 initiative was realized by International Sámi Film Institute and developed in close collaboration with the Office for Contemporary Art in Norway and the Norwegian Film Institute. That's a Lao from the outside. In the indigenous North Sami language, the word arran describes the hearth of a lavvo around which our storytelling has taken place since time immemorial. Arran 360 embodies the Sami perspectives on a circular time where past, present and future meet in a continual flow of ideas and realities. In addition, the Film Lavvo and its 360 program will present a separate AR exhibition with indigenous augmented reality artwork in connection with the Lavvo. And obviously invisible to the eye, but still there in a different dimension and available through an app in your phone. And I have no idea how this is going to work, but it will. The films represent the broadness and talent in Sami film and gives you a sense of where we are going and what's at stake. And here you can see kind of the equipment that they have constructed to make this 360 film, and the feeling will be amazing. I will briefly also present here the filmmakers that you will meet in Venice. It's Hans Pieski from the Finnish side of Sápmi. He's a videographer and photographer and documentarist. He has lived by and with the great river Diatno as his ancestors before him. His films often centered around the river and the nature surrounding it. And there is also Liselotte Weistedt, a Sami from the Swedish side of Sápmi, multimedia artist that works in different mediums. Her work spans from film to textiles and installations, and she has created dozens of short and feature films. There will also be Silja Zombie from the Norwegian side of the Diatno River. She has directed several short fictions and is currently working on her first feature fiction for children. We will also see Maria Helander. He is a Sami photographer, artist and filmmaker with an impressive track record. Lately as a receiver of the most prestigious film award in Finland, the 40th Risto Jarva Prize. Essential for her works is the balance between activism, humor and aesthetics, investigating the point of intersection between Sami tradition and Finnish modernity and colonialism. And what I think is what struck me also with this, when they explained to me about, in the board we have discussed this, and about the Arran, I guess many people have seen in a touristic kind of perspective nature, scenery, pictures. But this is an effort to make fiction film or storytelling, and not only just showing the scenery, but making films and stories in a circular perspective. And as I said, which is very much like our own holistic way of telling stories and sitting in a lavvo. So I think it will be quite an amazing experience and a continuation of the experience that the Sami had at the opening of the Venice Biennale, which was also fantastic. I will show two films about making the films. So one of those who are part of this group showing films in August at the Arran 360 is Ann Holmgren. She's a photographer and filmmaker who works in a wide range of cinematic expressions. Her films often circle around the relationality of humans and the non-human beings and dimensions. So if you can play the film about Ann Holmgren's preparations.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that was a very short glimpse into the preparations
of Ann Holmgren and the last, Ann Holmgren Aurebäck. And the sixth artist or filmmaker who will be at the Arran 360 is Elle Maria Eira, who is both a reindeer herder, artist, and filmmaker. As Lea said, or no, Christina said that there are always many, abilities in one person. They are not only filmmaker or only a yoiker, only an artist. They are also so much else. Elle Maria is a reindeer herder, artist, and filmmaker, and has created several renowned short films through the last 10 years. She is also well known as yoiker and musician, for the time being especially known for her current and past collaboration with Led Zeppelin's John Paul Jones. And we can also see a little glimpse of her film preparation for the Arran.
Nyt talvoilaika, nappasailas ja nivel tämän sit sortaika kaarta.
Men jeg tenker så sånn, det er jo en scene som er helt annerledes enn den der oppe.
Thank you. That was two small tastes of the preparations that they are on for the films that they are presenting in Venice in August at the Arran 360.
And you can find more about the project on this webpage. And so see you all again in Venice at a later point. Thank you.
Kiihtuu Gymbrit, and the Sámi Film Institute is really one of also our powerful Sámi institutions who has done a lot for the development of Sámi film, and is also a transnational institution. So it was really great to hear about the development of Arran 360. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Tokarski Slavomir. He is going to let us in on how EU can strengthen the Sámi culture. And Tokarski, I would ask you to present yourself and take the word. Kiihtuu.
Yes, good morning everybody, and if I look around I cannot help seeing myself in a double minority situation. Firstly, because I'm non-Sámi minority right now, and secondly that after all those fascinating and inspirational speeches I will be certainly much more boring. But you have to bear with me because I still have to tell you something about regional policy, about cross-border programs, about the funding, and about the projects we funded so far. Because in particular, the cross-border programs offer a lot of opportunities, and I think they also reflect this cross-border nature of Sámi people, which you mentioned today. And I think it's also very opportune that we meet today because the Sápmi week occurs in the moment when we are starting the new programming period 21-27. So this is the time to think about projects, this is time to think about how to design those programs, and also how to ensure that they, in the best way, take into account what you think and what you need. This debate today is also a sort of lesson and of interest to us when we later on interact with program authorities, that we can also bring in our understanding of your needs and your voice. So I think this listening exercise is very, very important to us, especially after what we all heard about what is wrong with this sort of attitude that we know better than you do what you need, and we know it also from other situations that it does not lead to good results. But let me start with the opportunities in the new Interreg program, which is called Aurora. I think that you are familiar with Interreg, and you are familiar with the focus on fostering cooperation across the borders, and you being by nature cross-national borders, you are a natural candidate for Interreg. So I'm quite convinced that the new program is really well placed to continue and to develop the cross-border cooperation between Sámi communities living in these regions in the years 21-27, maybe with the exception of Russia. But I also hear from Finnish colleagues that following the suspension of the cross-border cooperation with Russia, Sámi people cannot cross these borders any longer. So I also would like to tell you a couple of words about the past and how Interreg provided an important tool to preserve and develop Sámi culture and Sámi languages. So, for example, we looked and we saw the projects that were very much focusing on collecting and archiving examples of duoji, which is this traditional craft of Sámi people, digitalization of archives, and here I would name one project which was called AIDA, and which does not only help to preserve cultural heritage, but also created educational material for a new generation about duoji. Then we had a project entitled Digital Access to the Sámi Heritage Archives, which look into existing practices for indigenous archives, and which establish common ethical guidelines for the use of material relating to Sámi culture. And it has also contributed to establishing a trade and resource center for Sámi languages called Sámi Kielagaldu. And this center aims at standardization of Sámi languages and provides advice in this respect. One more project, which has a really difficult name, but it's called Deanu Leagis Samastit, and which contributed to the Tana River Valley Languages Center, which helps preserving these languages despite large distances through distant courses, camps, and events. I think what is also important is that Interreg is a sort of interface between Sámi organizations and national, regional, and local administrations, where you can jointly discuss the strategic direction of the program, of the Aurora program. So, for example, in this dialogue, you can evaluate Sámi projects or discuss why there have been, for example, no innovation project with Sámi partners so far, and what can be done to improve the situation. And in the same way, this is an opportunity for interlinkages between Sámi community and other important actors in the project. So, for example, I would name here Visit Arctic Europe project, where large numbers of actors, including Sámi organization and business, collaborate. And as a result of this collaboration, the project organizes experiences related to reindeer and dog sledge, which have a strong ownership of Sámi on the visiting industry and also benefits Sámi entrepreneurs. So if we look at the new program, we really hope that these projects will be continued and further developed, and we also hope that there will be greater involvement of Sámi also in entrepreneurship, research and innovation, and environmental projects. We had one project which I would like to mention here, which is called Indigenous Entrepreneurship, and it was really a sort of excellent networking opportunity for engaging with young Sámi entrepreneurs. And I think similar projects could be implemented with both Sámi and non-Sámi partners as teams of common interest, for instance, tourist culture or climate change adoption. So investments under this new program, which is coming right now, can certainly also contribute to the understanding and use of Sámi traditional knowledge, arbeidichtum. And I hope that this knowledge, for example, nature and biodiversity, will also contribute to sustainable practices to the benefit of all inhabitants in those regions. And there is also scope to tackle specific issues such as winter feeding of reindeers and ice covering grazing lands, because all these challenges are per definition cross-border, so there is a clearly added value for finding together solutions and exchanging practices. I also would like to draw attention to the new objective of Aurora program, which is common for the whole Interreg, which is better cooperation governance. And it is important because it can finance capacity building through cooperation of organizations with other organizations or with other people. So another theme here is this trust building through people-to-people cooperation. And this cooperation is important because what we see is that Sámi actors are seldom lead partners in projects with non-Sámi partners, in particular themes other than language and culture. So this better governance objective can provide for you opportunities to manage projects in other areas such as research, as I mentioned, innovation, entrepreneurship. And in this way you can also develop new skills and ability to lead other projects. And I think also this is important to think about what is called people-to-people projects, which is really something of relatively small size and focusing on building trust between Sámi communities and between Sámi and non-Sámi communities. So these projects can be really small, can be up to 50,000 euros, and they can take form of events inviting Sámi and other people living in the cross-border region to play sports, music, learn about reindeer herding, crafts, exchange ideas and practices on ecological behaviors. You can target school children and youth, for example, via youth camps, or you can target senior and other organizations that would also help to transmit this knowledge between generations. There are also opportunities for Sámi people in the national and regional development programs in Finland and Sweden, and you have to look carefully into those programs because there are opportunities to support, for example, Sámi research environments, to link Sámi research community into larger networks, and you can also find actions that strengthen entrepreneurship and that are based on Sámi culture and business development in Sámi society. So I will maybe stop here. Just the last words I wanted to say is that we also want to a little bit look into more synergies between different funding instruments in the EU, also reaching beyond the regional policy world. A couple of weeks ago my colleagues were in Skellefteå talking to Sámi representatives about this, and I think there was a lot of interest, so we will certainly pursue this dialogue, and this is also the way, as we see, to upscale Sámi projects, or also maybe to find a solution for this longer term approach that I understood that is often a problem for you. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Tokarski, and your Sámi was perfect. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting to hear more about the Aurora funding possibility, and I think also when we continue the panel session later, we can maybe go more into depths about how Sámi can utilize also other funds, and how maybe the EU system can make them more accessible. But with this being said, I want to thank all the today's interventions, Olugihtu Buahkat, and we also, of course, have gifts from you too. From one of my favorite dojars, I have both earrings and other jewelries from Per Stefan Idivuoma. And now I think I also am a happy owner of this fantastic pin. Why don't you, Leah, send it? Oh, and we will have a 10-minute coffee break before we continue the session with the panel. So, Olugihtu for now. then we are on again. And now with this great panel with me. As you can see on the board, I have with me now a new co-host, Nils Torvalds, which is also a member of parliament. Welcome. Ulla-Karin Sarri from the Sámi parliament on Swedish side. Boris Bohtin, welcome. And Ella Rauna Näkkelajärvi, a youth board member from the Sámi Association of Norway. Anna Sar, Boris Bohtin. And Tokarski is following from the previous session. Very happy that you also could take part in the panel. And then Ol Johan Gaup, producer of the Sámi Easter Festival and Sámi Grand Prix, and also a member of the cultural think tank, Boris Bohtin.
Thank you.
And we have been challenged to do a little panel discussion on the topics of the potential of the Sámi field, and as we talked about in the earlier session, there is a great and growing international demand and interest of Sámi art and culture in various artistic genres. And we are both award-winning and relevant in several major global venues, as the Venezia Biennale that Ella Rauna can speak more about later. She recently came from Venice, where she has been a host in the Sámi Pavilion. And but meanwhile, the Sámi art field experiences that the potential development are limited by insufficient resources, border barriers, and structural obstacles in the support mechanisms and policy instruments. So the main question for today is also how can national and transnational support schemes contribute to unleash the rising potential in the Sámi art field, and what is the potential of the Sámi art field. So I think that we might start with that question, and what do the panel see is the potential for the Sámi art and creative field? And I have a feeling that Ol Johan would like to start.
Thank you very much. I'm the producer for a music show on television that's called Sámi Grand Prix, and that's a good example of the potential of Sámi culture. We've been working on this show for over 30 years now, and last year we got a cooperation with the national broadcaster in Norway, NRK, on making this entertainment show in the best best sanity, the best time on television on a Saturday evening, which is the biggest television night in Norway. Like the Saturday evenings, everybody sits down to watch television, linear television, but also streaming. And we went there down to NRK and started developing this concept, and they saw the potential at once. They just took it at once. We just need to make a little bit of adjustments to the show, but this is going to be great. And that was a new experience for me, that Oslo and the national broadcaster were so welcoming on this concept. They really because they are looking for different expressions in medias because of the competition that is. For example, Netflix is going very much towards also making shows from in different languages. I saw that the EU had recently put up a demand for streaming devices to streaming services to take in more languages to can representative. The European languages should represent 20% of the films and TV series that are on Netflix, and that's a way that also Disney are going. They are working with stories from Bolivia, from the Pacific Ocean. They have done Frozen, which is inspired by the Sámi. So these stories from indigenous cultures, but also minority cultures, have a huge outreach to people. We just discussed this a little bit earlier around the coffee table about that. When you see into another culture, you also learn about yourself, and I think that's universal for humans to that you want to know more about yourself, and through, for example, Sámi culture, you can also learn about your own culture, and this is. NRK was very clear on that, and exceeded our expectations on that. You have to keep your language, your expressions. Those are the bases for this television show. You can't remove those things. Everything else you can do something about, but keep that, what makes you special. It needs to be on the top of everything. Otherwise it's just a normal show. It could be anything. So that special expressions that we have, that we are very lucky to have them, and we are very lucky that others also see that and want to work with that. So that's for the potential. Thank you.
Keith, Uljuan, and maybe this is a good time for you, Elirauna, to talk more about the experience in the Venezia Biennale.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I, of course, come here with my PhD in art. No, just kidding. But at least I can provide a youth view on the case. Yeah, when it comes to the potential, I really think that it's endless, and the Venice Biennale was just another way of showing that. I was lucky enough to get to be a part of the Sámi Pathfinders program, and I stayed in Venice for 3 weeks, and I worked as a mediator, pathfinder in the Sámi pavilion. Yeah, and it was quite overwhelming, the response we got. It was very, very, very good. I think my first day there we had a visitors record of 2,600 visitors. So of course when we get to show our Sámi artists and our Sámi art for such a big audience, I think it really does have an impact. Yeah, and so my job there was basically to talk to people and explain maybe the art and maybe about our culture, so that the visitors got a better understanding of what it all was. And I think that had a lot to say, because of course Anders Sunna, Marhanne Sara, and Paulina Fedorov, the message is kind of in a way the same, that what happens to land happens to us. And in that way, of course, it's a very important part, and it goes closely with the general theme of the pavilion for this year. Yeah, and even though their arts are kind of different, it's also the same, and explaining and talking to people. Of course, when they saw Anders Sunna's art piece, which is very visual, even if they had a little understanding on colonial history and and just indigenous history, they could maybe understand what it was about. But then it was very exciting to get to explain, for example, Marhane Sara's art, because it was for people who didn't understand, it was very like visually like nice, and they walked around and they smelled the art piece, the artwork, and but then when they got to hear about the background and what's happening in Sápmi, I think it was an eye-opener for a lot of people, and that's, I think, the exact point of the arts and why we are represented in the Venice Biennale this year, to tell our story and enlighten the world that yes, Sweden, Finland, Norway are quite liberal states maybe, but still there is colonialism, and yeah, so that was very nice, and I think this is definitely only the beginning for Sámi art in the world internationally.
Kiitos. I think the Venezia Biennale, for you that maybe don't know what we are talking about, the Venezia Biennale is one of the biggest art exhibitions in the world, and where different countries put up different pavilions. Thank you. And the Nordic pavilion was this year translated into the Sámi pavilion, with 3 Sámi artists that we are very proud of. And was actually, the Sámi pavilion was awarded the second best pavilion in the entire Venezia Biennale. So yes, our art and culture achieves a lot. I think that are there some other panelists who would like to answer on what they see as the potential of Sámi culture? Yes, please, Ulla-Karin.
Oh yeah, thank you. There is a great potential of Sámi culture, of course. We have our old cultural is built on traditional knowledge, and we have a lot of areas of our culture. We have the handicraft, the fishing, the hunting, also food culture, literature, which is rather new, film, etc. And if we can bring about our culture to the rest of the world, and also show the diversity of our culture, that would be a great achievement. And we could also think, we have so many from the south of Sweden, from the south of Norway to the north, and the Finnish border, and to the Kola Peninsula. There we have a lot of different cultural expressions that it is necessary to keep in this new world with those causes. There is a possibility, there is perhaps some, it could be the traditional handicraft could be standardized, formalized, and conformity. That would be something that is negative to our culture. I would like it to keep the diversity. Thank you.
can I continue while the microphone is open and say a couple of words about actually the structure of culture. If you travel through Finland from north down to south, you're going to find a lot of place names with the Sámi origin, which is actually telling something very important. For at least 1,000 years, the Sámi population has been living in most of the areas of what is called the boreal forest. And then for different reasons, and that goes for you can start with a crusade program from the popes in the 11th century, and you can see the same tendency in the Novgorod, Veliki Novgorod, where they sort of pushed the Sámi population northwards and northwards to the position you actually have today, which from a cultural point of view actually has created something which is, you can see in almost every culture which has been oppressed, that you look backwards to what you have lost. And for the moment, I think what we can feel and hear here is a change of seas. One good friend of mine was a very young minister of education in Finland, Ulf Sundqvist. That was in the late 1960s. And then there came a delegation from the Sámi part of Finland and said that, Ulf, you as a representative of minorities in Finland, you should understand that we need higher education for the Sámi people. And that's actually the starting point of something which then developed into something where you see the results today. Because if you don't have a possibility for higher education, how on earth can you develop something? So the starting point for a new era for Sámi people in Finland actually started from there. That was a very small step, and some of you could of course say that was not enough, and it wasn't enough. But in small steps afterwards, you can see that something has happened. We have broken the ice in a way. So if you go to Inari, you can see the museum there, the Sida, and you can see also the new building for the Sámi Parliament. And all of a sudden you can understand that something has happened in the approach of official Finland towards the Sámi population. And this is then translated in the activities from the Sámi population themselves. So you don't just see sort of the traditional art anymore. You see something new coming out, new songs. There is a wonderful video from two girls on the bridge in Utsjoki, the bridge between Finland and Norway. You can see new way of doing the traditional clothing. You can see new films, as we have already heard. So what I think we are actually experiencing at this very moment is a new era where the Sámi people is breaking out from the victimizing period of culture and looking forwards and opening up something for the future. And I think what Ola Johan said about NRK is true also for the Finnish broadcasting company Yle, where you have the Sámi news already for some, I think, 10 years, 15 years, which is also part of showing how important the Sámi culture is for us. And then, of course, to say some words about the not so good part. If you could go east of the Sámi area in Finland and Norway, and you go to the Russian part, then you see that you don't see the developments we have been able to see for the last decades in Finland and Norway and Sweden regarding Sami culture. And that's going to be one of the biggest challenges we have for the future. And Slavomir already told you that due to the war against Ukraine, we won't be able to do together with our Russian minorities, the Sami-speaking Sami Russian minorities, what we should do, but that's something we have to open for the future. But that's sort of my contribution at this time. Thank you.
Olugihtu Nilsen, I think that we kind of also from the Sami perspective experience the same kind of future possibilities, and I think what has been a crucial change for Sami art and culture is that I think we have always had a huge international interest in Sami art and culture, as Leah also talked about earlier today, but now also a national interest from the national countries, Norway, Sweden, and Finland in particular, and have gotten a lot of new allies also in the cultural field, and I think that is that changes things and brings more visibility to the Sami people and Sami art and culture, which is of course really great. And I also just wanted to comment on what Ulla-Karin talked about earlier, and that is that the Sami culture, the word is defined very broadly in Sápmi, which I think is different from the majority society that we also include in intangible culture when we talk about art and culture. But Tokarski, would you like to say some few words about the potential?
No, I don't, because I know too little about it. But I just to echo what Niels said, that I think it's indeed important that I mean you mentioned this mentality which is looking back. I think it's history. It's called post-colonial mentality, and it's important to break away from that, right? And it's important. The culture is not only about tradition, but it's also something that allows you also to live the reality and to find replies to the reality which is surrounding you, right? So I think this tradition on one side, but I think that this Venezia Biennale is a fantastic thing. My wife's from Venezia, so I will see it certainly. But if I was more personal reflection, and certainly if I think there is this notion right now which has been coined a couple of years ago, which is called solstalgia, which is about trauma that is caused by climate change, because the territory that is surrounding you is not what it used to be. And I think you are one of the first cultures that is experiencing this trauma. So it's also sort of universal experience for all of us, probably. And it's important also how do you mediate this and what will be you telling us. If I now move to the domain that I'm responsible for, the regional policy, I think it's really important because I hear this message that, you know, we need something special, we are different, we are not understood properly. So I think there is no other way than making your voice really heard. And for this you need to engage, and I understand it's not easy. I was once told that before you speak you need a couple of hours of meaningful silence. But I don't see any other way than really speaking up and telling what you need and what's the best way to achieve it. So it's a pity, because there was this idea of Sami Secretariat here in Brussels, where the whole thing didn't work in the end, because Interreg can provide money for the project but not for the running costs. And I think it's a pity, because it would be a very important voice that could be actually consulted by us, not only for regional policy but also for other programs on a more daily basis. But I see that there are now different techniques for more participatory or deliberative democracy. You may see also that we are discussing future of Europe by taking citizens to panels and enabling them to discuss different things in a meaningful way. And I think it's also possible with Sámi people. Because right now these programs are being put into motion, and if you don't tell, if you don't engage, if you don't discuss, it is difficult that they reflect what you really need. So I think that would be my, if I may say so, advice. And I think it's a clear point that it's not us who know better. You know better.
We have the ideas, and we have the possibilities, and we are able to show our culture, to make it thrive. But one are talking about self-determination, but on the political area, the Sámi people, I think in all three countries, don't have self-determination when it comes to money, when it's come to funding. So what the Sámi people need to keep on thriving, cultural, political as well, then we always have to ask for money from our governments, and we have to argue very well and get the majority society to understand why we need the money, and for cultural reasons. The Swedish Parliament, the Sámi Parliament of Sweden, we have asked, I have to use that word, we have asked for 33 million Swedish crowns to develop to the cultural area. But we are in the hands of the Swedish government if they think that our ideas, we want to have a national literature center, a national scene for theater, and culture center. There are some among those areas to develop. And I think EU have a great, you can contribute to our culture in a good way. We have the ideas, we have the culture, we know what we want to do, and perhaps we can have some support. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, Ulla-Karin, and earlier we heard from Tjallagårte and the Sámi Film Institute, which are both strong cultural institutions in Sápmi, but who fight really hard to survive on a daily basis, as Lea also talked about. And I think that's a quite realistic everyday life in Sápmi, that there is a huge lack of resources and funding, and we really are depend on our allies, both in the government but also the strong national institutions. And guess what? We have a audience question, which I really love. I appreciate that the audience also take parts in the panel. So please introduce yourself.
My name is Veronica Kristoffersdotter Ekeke, and I'm from Sweden, Sápmi and Sweden, and a representative of Sámi Atnam. I'm also a teacher, and so education, all these things is very important to me. And what you have brought up here, we have talked about the different potentials the Sami culture has to offer to the EU and to the world. And what I've noticed these days is that even within EU, Malin Björk said it before here, and we've heard it earlier, is that even amongst the members of the EU Parliament, there's lack of knowledge about the Sami people, and that's quite alarming because we've been here forever and we're not going anywhere. So a part of it is representation, awareness, and representation is very important. And the language, the EU has a recommendation for 8 key competences, and one of them is the language, communication in your mother tongue. And as you know, the Sami language is endangered, and it is so hard. We are talking about the struggle here, like Ulla-Karin was talking about the struggle, and anything we want to do to revitalize our culture, to maintain our culture, to pass it on to our kids, to further generations with all things, with the livelihoods, traditional livelihoods, culture and arts, language. We receive resistance all along, and it's lack of funding. It's very hard. And even in Sweden, they have, according to their own investigation, they have failed in the school systems to help us to develop our language. And I liked what Leah was saying before about Sami literature, which is very important. How can we develop our language if we don't have literature? We need it to develop our language, to hear our language with film, music, all these things. It helps people to see us, but it also helps us to hear our languages, to develop our culture, which I think is very important. So I would like to raise my voice to the EU Parliament again about how important it is for us to get help with fundings in these areas, with education, with language, with film, arts, all these matters, because it is very, very important. And even in Sweden, I fight a lot for raising awareness within schools, both for to pass on the Sami culture, but also to actually talk about Sami people to Swedish people. Because when I grew up, we never learned anything about the Sami people. We learned about Native Americans, Aborigines, but nothing about Sweden and our heritage with Sami people. And still today, as a teacher, I know it's part of the curriculum, but it's up to each teacher to just choose if they want to just say, we have minorities in Sweden and they are, and that's enough, you know. So it is, everything we are trying to do, we have to go through a lot of obstacles to reach there. There's lots of resistance. So I would like EU to help us to bring forward these questions, since we are not, we don't have representatives in the parliament, which I also would like us to have. But I would like EU to help us to for example, Leah said, to help fund the literature program that they are doing. It's a great start to help us to revitalize our language and education. Thank you.
The issues Veronica raised are important, and they are not easy. I'm going to tell you, because this is something we probably haven't reflected. We have a lot in every European member state. We have minorities, and in almost every European member state, we have minorities without rights. We have had a minority intergroup in the parliament for whatever time, and almost all the minorities in have some difficulties in getting sort of the central state to accept them. You go to France and ask, how are the Corsicans feeling about the central state? Or you go to Spain and it's going to be very inflamed. So you have this problem all over, that we aren't actually very good at minorities. We are still in a way thinking in imperial terms, where the center part of the state is deciding which language you speak. And in small steps we are able to open up this. Therefore, we had just some weeks ago, we had a situation where you probably know that the Åland Islands is probably the only place inside the European Union where you have something which is close to autonomy. And that's been there for about 100 years, and sometimes with great resistance from the central state. So the Åland Islands has for many years been sort of the star pupil, showing that it's possible to do something about it. But it's going to be an uphill battle. And what Veronica said, my background is the journalist. I've been sort of not all over the world, but in some difficult places. And what you meet almost in every country is minorities not able to develop the language according to the new circumstances, because as soon as you have a computer, as soon as you have new technology, you're going to need new words sort of in the different languages. And if you don't have a literature, then you don't have the new words. You can go back to in Swedish history and look what the great Swedish authors made to enable the Swedes to speak in modern terms. That's true literature. That's not sort of the government deciding what new words come in. If you go through the Svenska Akademins ordlista, which is a fairly long history, then you have a lot of words created by poets. So you're going to need you're going to need culture in the real world, in literature, to enable people to speak about what's happening in their societies today.
Yes, tools and literature in our own languages is really important. I have a daughter, she's now 8, and her first language is Sámi and Norwegian second language, and then she also has English as her third language, and she has learned that through YouTube. So it really shows that it's so important that we have these tools also in our society. But I want to also go back to Veronica's question about financing, because the resource question is one of our main challenges in the Sámi society. And earlier we talked about the Aurora Fund and the different funding possibilities in the EU system, and also that there are not that many Sámi that apply the EU system, and it would be great to maybe reflect upon that a bit. Why do you think that the Sámis are not applying the EU system? Is it not? And from my perspective, it might be that it's not so accessible for us. That we, because of the scarce resources we have, making a EU application, it takes a lot of resources, and resources is nothing that we have a lot of in Sápmi. So how can we make it more accessible for the Sámi culture field, also for the other funds than the Aurora Fund? Maybe both Takorski and Nils is the persons to answer these questions.
Well, I'm not going to claim that our programs are particularly simple, so certainly there is a grain of truth in what you're saying. But again, the Aurora program is starting right now, so I think quite soon they will be launching call for proposals. Then you have the element of selection criteria. Then you can say, because we have this very strong partnership principle, meaning that people can come, can make their voice heard, can tell what they need. And you should really engage in making those selection criteria accessible and easier for you, or easily understood. Because anyway, otherwise it will not happen. I think also there are many funding opportunities for skills, and often skills that you need for running these projects. I think entrepreneurship is certainly one of them, and is also the key to make those projects sustainable, right? Because this is often the issue that we give money for the project, and we expect that this project later on will be sustainable. And to make it happen, you need to be entrepreneur. That also applies to culture. I think we had this one project from Inter North, from the last programming period, called Sámi Musical Academy, where the project was teaching at the same time traditional music, but also entrepreneurship skills, so that culture also becomes a source of living and sustainable living. So I would really advise you to, and I think my colleagues are also ready to help, to engage with Aurora right now, to see those calls for the project that are forthcoming, and again to make your voice heard. I think this is the best way. There are also other programs which are certainly relevant for culture. You have Creative Europe program, which is run by colleagues in DG Culture and Education. They just now, I think, launch call for creative labs, I think it's called. It's about culture and digital element, which we also heard is quite relevant for you. There is a desk officer, I think, sitting in Finland, for Sweden. So these are also contacts where you can engage and see how your point of view can be taken into account.
If there is one complaint I hear fairly often, that's the difficulties to fill all the requirements for different EU programs. And that's not just sort of a Sámi problem. I can tell you that Helsinki University, where I think most of the people are able to read and write, they have immense problems with filling out the program. Why? Because we are in a way forced to have a control culture, sort of. Because as soon as EU is giving away money, then some of those resources are not used in the best of ways. And you have cultures in some of the member states that are not sort of recommendable for you or for anybody. So what I could actually recommend is that we have some specialists from the different regions in Finland sitting here in Brussels. They know quite a lot of how things should be run and how they could be filled. And I think with a slightly higher degree of cooperation, I think some of those issues can actually be solved in a fairly sort of human way. Not you have to answer yourself how to manage it, but I think most of them are manageable. But it requires some goodwill, and then it's doable. And then I can't answer for the DGs in the Commission for it. They think there is a tendency in the Commission that everything is very easy from the inside, but from the outside it's probably not that easy.
Kiihtu. Let's spend some minutes also to talk about artistic freedom and funding. This is something that we discussed a lot working together with the think tank. And some of the experiences from the artists were that they really would prefer apply from Sámi funders because this meant that when they applied for an art project, they could focus in the project description telling about the art project, but not so much about giving the background history about the Sámi and why this art project is important for the Sámi community and etc. Because this knowledge would already exist in the Sámi funding possibilities. And Pirita Näkelejärvi, who you heard yesterday, was also a member of the think tank. She said, and I quote, artistic freedom is limited in Finland by the structures of the art world. Our artists are not able to choose their perspective and starting point because in order to receive funding at the national level, you must frame your work in a special way that stems from Western thinking. If you build your approach solely from an indigenous way of thinking, you run the risk of not having access to art funding. And I think that Pirita makes a lot of good points, which is also, I think it's really great that we have the possibility to apply the Aurora Fund, and I know a lot of the projects that have received the funding. But also when we apply these funds, we also always have to, change our projects, and also we often have to include the element of what does this bring to the majority society, which sometimes feel, to be honest, quite unfair, because we need these resources in our own society, and in the majority society the resources are already so much of. So is this something that we could reflect upon, that how could we strengthen the artistic freedom of Sámi art and culture and the self-determination in the future, both in national and transnational supporting mechanisms?
I can try to. Yeah, sorry. I will try to reflect on the very complex question that you just asked. But there's also one question: what's the main challenge that hinders true development of Sámi art and creative field? I've noted here in my notes that access to culture and access to language, as there's been noted here by several, that the Sámi people have their access to their own language and culture by, for example, Sámi literature. That's very important to create new art and work creatively on new fields, that you know that your language and culture well. And for example, I'm working on a project now with the University Museum in Tromsø, which have 14,000 traditional Sámi yoiks in their archives, which are not accessible for the Sámi people. These yoiks were gathered from 1952, 70 years ago, to today. It's like 70 years of recordings of traditional yoiks, and the oldest singers or yoikers in those recordings were born for over 140 years ago in those archives, and those archives are not accessible for the Sámi community, for the Sámi people at all. So I'm working really hard to try to put everything out on Spotify, so we can gain access to our rich yoiking traditional and culture, and thus inspire. For example, we heard Maria Mortensson last night, which is an amazing Sámi artist, and she's gotten very much of her inspiration to make music and to work with traditional yoik from archives, because that's how you can find the rhythms, find the ways of yoiking, and then can work, be knowledgeable enough to work more with arts and creative field. And that's also if it's a problem for us to gain access to language and access to our culture, how is it for those who we apply grants from to know what we are speaking about when we have difficulties to find like inspiration for? How is it for them to get an application where it says traditional yoik? What is it? What is it? It doesn't say anything for those we apply from, and we've experienced that several times in our festival. We're trying to apply for regional funding, national funding, that we are down prioritized because of what reindeer herding, reindeer racing with reindeer. What is that? What are you even talking about? We rather fund this jazz festival, jazz, which is a globally huge genre, gains funding from regional and national and international grants, rather than endangered like music. Jazz isn't endangered. I'm not a supporter of jazz festivals in that sense that they should get huge funding, but is this? It's so accessible that it's easy for the grants to understand why this needs to be funded, because everybody knows jazz, and thus it's really easy to catch up on the idea compared to yoik. What is that even? So it's a complex question, but and it's like a catch-22 that if you don't get grants to work with Sámi arts and the creative field, you don't have the possibility to put it out there, so grantors can like understand this is it. And yeah, so we're often up in that situation. But of course, concrete ideas that could be useful to us as institutions, organizations, artists, for finding these regional grants and Aurora program is of course we need to know about these, because we are like in concrete seminars, courses, annual courses where we go through every possibility. So that could be something to work with together with the Sámi artistic field, and then these are the possibilities for you guys, because it's often not enough, as we've experienced, to try to reach out to one regional grant. If we reach out to 10 regional grants, then we might get something, and then it might get easier to get more from the region. So that's some thinking from my side. Thank you.
And unfortunately, when having fun, time flies, and actually we have spent our panel time already, and I think that me and you, Nils, we could end the panel with some closing remarks. What do you bring from this discussion as the main takeouts?
Well, you said something in the previous, when you presented the previous question. You said that you need to frame things. I think framing issues is actually very important, and what you are going to need in the future is an ability to frame the different needs you have and finding one frame for them, because the possibilities you have nowadays with EU funds is that you can combine different funds. You are allowed to to use different funds, but then you need a framing which enables then the bureaucracy and the politicians to understand what you are out for. So what I take from this is that we, making the decisions, we need to be much more sensitive towards the needs you have. And that is sometimes when you come from a majority culture, you don't have the sensitivity for it. As a member of the Swedish-speaking minority, I have probably slightly more sensibility for the needs of the Sami people. So therefore I can say that when I started my campaign 2019 for the European Parliament, I started it up in Utsjoki because I thought it's a way of making a statement that even if I'm coming from the very south of Finland and coming from a very different culture, I have to make a statement that I'm not just sort of the MEP for a small Swedish-speaking minority, which is usually sort of thought of, they have everything and they don't need actually much of help. So my statement was that I'm the MEP for everybody in Finland. And I'm not just an MEP for everybody in Finland. I am actually, as a member of the European Parliament, I'm an MEP for every European member, every European citizen. And I sometimes have to be also a MEP for those who aren't yet members of the European Parliament, taking into account the Ukrainian ones and so on. So I think we have a lot of moral obligations, and therefore what I'm most thankful for during my years, I've done a lot of backpacking up in the Sámi region. That was my first experience. And during the panel, some of you said something. I think there was Slavomir who said that you need silence sometimes to be able to think. One of the greatest experiences after my first hike up in Utsjoki was, I was thinking, what was the most sort of catching experience, and I couldn't understand it. I had to go back there again. And after my second, third or fourth journey, I understood that the great difference between any place in Europe and the very up north of Finland, there was the silence. And people here in Brussels or in Helsinki or in Stockholm, they don't actually know what silence is. And silence is what you have there. Not silence about you, because you also have a silence about you, and very much so. But silence is something which we need very much. And therefore, there was a guy up in Utsjoki trying to make business out of journeys into silence. That was not a very commercial thing to do, but I think he was on the right track. There is something in this region you can't find anywhere else on this earth, and I think we have to cherish it, and the only way to cherish it is to do it together with you. And therefore I was very happy when I was asked if I can co-host this meeting, and whatever I can do for you, I promise I will do. I will sit for 2 more years in the European Parliament, and then when that period comes to a close in 24, I'm about 79 years old, so I think I have a right to stop there. But I'm still counting on being in Finland for you in the future. So take good care of yourself, and don't be shy about your needs. Thank you.
Yes, and I will just add some few closing remarks, but shortly. My main takeouts is that we are highly dependent on good allies, and I hope that these days here is a great start of a good allyship with the EU system. And we have talked about raising our needs and raising the awareness. And for that we need space. So we need to be included. We need to be given space for our voices. And we need you to share visibility and share power. So in addition to sensitivity, I think we also need to have knowledge, to raise knowledge, but also for our knowledge to get space in the system. And I think that Ella Rauna has a short closing remark, which we
Yes, since I'm here to represent the youth, I won't leave without saying what I think about the youth. As a Sami youth, of course, we have a lot to fight against. We have our future is unpredictable, of course, and it is about our future, and also our future within the arts. And so when it comes to like the funding issue and like applying for grants and stuff, I think a way of getting more youth to participate in the arts and take that road, there needs to be some kind of security for us, and some kind of like help with these processes with the funds. It shouldn't be that in addition to fighting against climate change, about the governments coming in taking our lands, but then also to use the time to apply for funds and fight to get money. That definitely shouldn't be something that we have to do. And also, you talked about artistic freedom earlier. I think a way of motivating youth to participate in arts is also to secure that when we do art, we don't have to do it within these Western borders, that we actually do have the artistic freedom. And the last point, I think, for example, I saw that the International Sámi Film Institute took in a school class and showed them, the new studios and everything. And I think that's very important to kind of to invite in Sami youth from an early age, to kind of get them to understand, okay, that Sami art, it doesn't have to be only this like small box of things, that it's so diverse, as has been said here. So yeah, I think that's very important to kind of show and actively show to youth.
Thank you. Perfect ending words, that there is a true potential also for young people in the Sami art and culture field. I love that. So with those words, we would like to thank both the audience and the panel. And of course, you will also get a pin from our amazing doyar. Ol-Johan, would you do the honor? And to close this whole thing up, I think we will have some yoik.
I'm ending this with a joke about the star girl, and the words are: in a dark world, we need stars to so that the lost people who are lost can find their way home. In a grey world, we need colors, so people who are depressed can again find joy. And in a silent world, we need notes, so people again can find their singing. Asteneita joikkada njana la lu la 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 te la lu la 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 seunjes maailmis tarpasin asti vai lahpon olo moruokto teivet sig himnit, vai slund och norr mot ilukaune. Ja jaskoda maailmestarpasi luodi, vai olmo fasten joika kohteet. Teidän asten jeitto joikkodan kujuloilla, la 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 la. La 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 no no na 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 la 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 la. La 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 no yo la la yo la la no no la 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 la.
So, everyone, thank you to the great last panel of this event. And I will not hold you long, but I would like to say a few closing words when we have now concluded this first EU-Sámi week. And it has been a great event. We are a bit tired now, but it has all been worth it. And I would like to say that this whole event has been a product of an EU-funded project called the Filling the EU-Sámi Knowledge Gaps. And I think actually that through this event we have been filling some of the knowledge gaps. So we are taking one step ahead on that goal. We've had very interesting discussions. We have created networks. We have started new alliances that we can build on in the work to come. And as has been said many times during these 3 days, this is not the end, even though this project will end in September, but we have started on this work and we will continue it. And I have some thanks to extend. And first of all, of course, to Interreg Nord, who has funded this project that has made this event possible. And from Sámi Council and Sámi Nuora, that are the lead partners in this project, we are thankful for the great collaboration with Interreg Nord during this project. And also, of course, our co-funders of this project, Region Västerbotten and Norrbotten, and Troms and Finnmark counties in Norway, the Sámi Parliament of Norway, and also Lappinliitto, that has been the collaborators through this project. We've also had great collaborations for arranging this event here in Brussels during these days. For the cultural program, the Finnish Cultural Institute here, and also the Swedish representation to the EU that has helped us with events during these weeks, and that are also collaborations that will continue. And of course, the co-hosting members of parliament that have also been a great contribution to the programs. Sirpa Pietikäinen, Alvina Alametse, Erik Bergqvist, and Alice Bakunke, and of course, for today's session, we had Nils Torvalds and Malin Björk. A great hand of for all those collaborators. And last but not least, I would like to extend
gratitude to the Committee of Regions that have helped us and provided this venue for this event. We are very happy that we have been able to visit these buildings these days. And of course, nothing would be possible without my excellent organizing team. So, and Nila, our venue and tech guy, Enni, there is Anja Maria. She's probably out fixing something. And of course, our tech guys, Rune and Christopher. The streaming has been excellent. And the SoMe, I hope that everyone has tweeted and reposted and all that you do on SoMe. I've not been the responsibility of that. Aile and Susanna has already left, but she's reposting wherever she is. And so this is and has been and are a true Sámi owned and Sámi produced event, and it shows also what great talents we have, and that we will continue, because Anja Maria is also one of the trainees of this project. So you see, the trainees are already out doing and keeping us all on track, doing an excellent work. So with these words, I would like to thank all the speakers and all the audience, and so grateful that everyone could actually come here through strikes and everything. And I hope that you also will be able to get home. Because apparently the strike is ongoing. We've been in our bubble here in Brussels, but we will eventually go home, and I wish you all a great summer, and I wish the cuff markings for everyone to be great, and we will see each other again in Brussels, I am sure of. So let's continue these great alliances and these hold on to these networks, and we will